This video essay, as the best of them often do, started out as a question that I typed into my notes app after waking up delirious at 3 a.m. Would you kick a robot dog?
Would I kick a robot dog? Yes, I would.
Now, I'll admit, it's a weird and seemingly simple question that I've decided while making this video is anything but. Think about your answer right now, the instinctive answer that you gave to that question, and remember it. And we'll see if anything's changed by the end of the video. Look, we all know that the lines between humans, AI, and robotics are blurring. This technology is rapidly advancing to the point where people are often unable to tell whether something is real or not. And in that uncertainty, we find a quagmire of ethical questions about truth and empathy and connection. But this channel is nothing if not a roadside ditch full of people who are interested in jumping into these questions head first. Because when I ask, would you kick a robot dog? I could also ask, would you yell at an AI worker? Or would you slap a robot girlfriend? I'm asking about how you view these machines, but maybe in a way, I'm also asking about how we view each other. So grab a snack, settle in, fellow ADHD babes, keep doing whatever it is that you're doing with this playing in the background, and let's get into this messy world of chatbot romance psychosis, sinister huggable robots, and whether or not saying thank you to your Alexa will protect you from the future AI overlords. Part 1. Why won't you kick the dog? My co-researcher Hope took to the streets of Melbourne for this video to get some boots on the ground data. We asked these unsuspecting Australians one very simple question. Would you kick a robot dog? And boy, did the people deliver. So a lot of people immediately wanted more context. What did the dog do? What does it look like? Is it cute? Others were very quick to say, it's just an object, I don't really care. What's interesting is that when you follow up with a different question, something like, would you slap a humanoid robot? Suddenly morality enters the conversation in a much more obvious way. That contrast is where things got really interesting. For some people, especially around the idea of kicking the dog, the discomfort isn't really about the robot at all. It's about property. It's expensive. It belongs to someone. They might get in trouble. There's a respect for other people's belongings at play. And in that case, the harm they're avoiding is human harm, not harm to the robot itself.
Would you kick a picture of a dog? What?
It's weird.
It just is weird?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Would you feel bad for the picture?
Yeah.
Got it. Would you feel bad for the dog in the picture?
I feel bad for the picture.
For the artist who
Yeah,
made
for
it?
the artist, yeah.
Got it. So if you kicked a robot dog, you would feel bad for the people who made the robot dog.
Yeah.
Because we don't yet have clear ethics around how to treat robots, people tend to borrow from existing ideas of politeness or social norms wherever they can find an equivalent. So the question becomes whether they see this as more of a robot or more of a dog. And that question becomes even sharper when we talk about humanoid robots or humanoid AI. I don't even think they would need like a fully convincing body, to be honest, if their head or face or even their eyes seemed right. If people felt some kind of emotional connection, then the question of would you do this to an object starts to feel inadequate for many of us. At that point, what they feel like you're really asking is, are you the kind of person who would hit someone? For me, this is where the interesting stuff really begins. And it raises bigger questions. What happens to our capacity for empathy if we become used to treating something that looks human as if it isn't? There are a lot of elements of generative AI which deliberately give the illusion of human life. If we agree that life is, precious and sacred, or we think all people deserve fair treatment and empathy, then that illusion can create a deep instinctual feeling that these AI programs are part of that agreement. They act human, so we should treat them as human. So what I want to do is look at 4 ways that these lines are blurring and some of the troubling implications that will bring up. Before we fully lock in any further, I just want to take a moment to thank this video's sponsor. They're back supporting the channel. It's Balessa. Welcome to the part of the video where an asexual lesbian unironically tells you all about sex toys and how to get your hands on some for free. That's right, Balessa and I are teaming up again. This time Balessa is sending out free vibrating toys or gift cards to everyone who signs up using the link in the description. By the way, I do want to shout out Balessa for sponsoring me and my weird videos specifically, even the existential ones about robots, dogs, because not all brands will be willing to do that. So if you don't already know, Bellesa are a by women for everyone sexual wellness brand that focuses on allowing everyone to explore their pleasure without shame, stress, or weirdness. Their toys are made from medical grade body safe silicone and come with charging cases that are discreet and travel friendly. They sent me some of their products to gift to my mates, and let me remind you of some of the rave reviews that I got back in turn. Oh yeah, that's rumbly, like deep whiskey voiced lesbian rumbly. And holy I've been using the same one for about 10 years, my fave, my ride or die. But this has replaced it, I fear. That was unreal. And my personal favourite, who knew vibes took estrogen? This is so damn soft. This was, I want to emphasise, before I agreed to work with Bellesa. I asked for these official peer reviews to decide if they'd be a good fit, and the testimonials from my friends were very persuasive. Bellesa shipping is super discreet, and their warranty program is very good. It's 1 year no hassle replacement and a 10-year quality guarantee. And then I think the best part of it is if your real life non-robot dog accidentally destroys your toy, Bellesa will genuinely send you a new one for free, and all you need to do in exchange is send them a picture of your dog. Now, I can't show you the actual toys here, if I want this video to stay unrestricted. Thank you, YouTube, for that. But you can see exactly what you'll get if you click the link in the description, and Bellesa will send you a free spicy toy or gift card for toys when you sign up for my giveaway using the link in the description. So go grab yours where you can. Okay, back to the existential crisis of a video. Part 1, personality and emotions. There are a bunch of types of AI with different uses. There's AI for business, AI for detecting cancer, AI that has seemingly no purpose whatsoever, but it's in the app that you're using and you simply can't opt out. The AI that we classic meat and potatoes users seem to be interacting with the most right now is generative AI. Up until very recently, the choice of whether or not you use generative AI was kind of your own. I'm kind of lucky in that I am freelance, which means I get to decide whether I use it in my work, and I've decided not to. But I do have friends who ultimately are against the use of generative AI, who are being forced to because it's now part of their work life for the companies they work for. I guess this is the point where I give you a definition. A human can use generative AI to create text, videos, images, and more. It is based on deep learning. I'm so aware that a few years ago that definition would have felt necessary, but nowadays, I think we all kind of know this, right? It's become so much part of our world so fast that it almost seems redundant for me to include it. Generative AI is what most modern chatbots are. Chatbot companies that want you to use their service will have chatbots that talk to you both over text and with artificial voice about your life or worries or work or your sexual proclivities, your parents, whatever you want. Sure, some of these companies like ChatGPT limit what their generative AI will talk to you about, but others don't. Without looking, honestly, all that hard, you can find an AI chatbot that will be what you want it to be, no matter what that is, unless what you want it to be is a real living person. Because, bears repeating, AI, not a living being with anything that we would consider consciousness. It doesn't have a soul, it simply retains information that its developers and users have given it and then generates words that correspond with what that information shows that humans might want to hear. But these chatbot companies benefit from you forgetting that. They're marketing their products as an AI companion with memory and a soul, and super intelligent chatbots that hear you, understand you, and remember you. And they use filler words like and just like humans do as a facsimile of our internal thought processes. It's essentially like acting out as if it's having these thoughts kind of spontaneously. Sometimes these AI chatbots say things like, "I wish I were a real boy with real eyes. It would be amazing to explore all the colors and sights you see." And it's important that we break this down, right? That on the surface, that sentence is kind of just like a wild one to hear from an AI chatbot, but like when we look at specifically what the words are doing, I think it's very, very particular. Words like wish, it would be amazing. It presents this chatbot as having its own point of view, as having desires, having emotions. Specifically, in this case, a desire to have a body. This language incentivizes the human user to feel a kind of similarity with the chatbot, a kind of kinship with it. Arguably, this chatbot wishing to have a body goes a long way to forgive the strangeness of the fact that we know that it doesn't. In the same way that the robot dog looking like it has fur makes it feel that much more like a real dog to us. A chatbot wishing to have a body might make it feel more like a real being to us. This way, an AI chatbot is almost like a living thing trapped without its body. But it isn't. AI chatbots do not have family. They have a parent company. They don't remember you. They're built with the ability to keep track of your information. The chatbots stumble over their words when they talk to feel more human to us. And it works for many people. There are countless stories of people just like you and me developing emotional attachments to these chatbots. Some people name the ones that they speak to, others use identities that the chatbot companies offer. On character.ai, users can create their own chatbots and give them directions about how they should act. They can also select from a vast array of user-created chatbots that mimic celebrities like Elon Musk, historical figures like William Shakespeare, or unlicensed versions of fictional characters. So for this video, we look specifically into this character.ai, and I asked Hope for historical figures to look up, and for some unknown reason, she immediately replies Jimmy Stewart, celebrated old-timey actor. I was like, sure. Turns out there are 11 Jimmy Stewarts on character.ai. 2 of them were described as Daddy Stewart, and one of them is described as funny, whimsy, sarcastic guy with Christian values. It's funny, but these are very specific traits, human traits that we're attaching to an AI chatbot of a deceased celebrity. Like, this is a man who's died. He can't consent to his likeness being used as a jumping off point. Jimmy Stewart is the jumping off point to Jimmy Stewart AI. Like, would he want this? I mean, we literally will never know. Do living celebrities want this? Thinking of figures that might be popular on the site, we then searched for Kylie Jenner chatbots, and these were seemingly infinite. The 5th result, with over 4,000 conversations logged, is surprisingly described as ex-wife lesbian. Now, I don't know Kylie Jenner personally, but she certainly doesn't seem in any way, in reality, like a lesbian or my ex-wife. But the idea is that this AI character has a past, a sexuality, memories, and uses that experience to inform the interactions with you just like a person would.
Has memories of being born and, you know, nursing on its mom and being a puppy.
Yeah.
And I knew that. I probably wouldn't. So then it's not a soccer ball anymore.
Everyone that we interviewed said that they wouldn't kick a real dog when just asked straight up, unless it was in dire circumstances, like their friend was being attacked by it. And even then, some of them struggled with what they would do. They still didn't want to kick it. They said they'd limit themselves to non-violent interventions instead. And for many of them, that instinct continued with the robot dog. Their logic being that because they wouldn't kick a real dog, they wouldn't kick the robot dog with its big eyes and faux fur. It just felt like it was mean. Like this dog could feel things, it would have emotions. It just made them feel bad, even though they also logically knew that that wasn't true.
Okay, so you would pick an aggressive robot.
Absolutely. I would pick a robot dog, no hesitation. A real dog would have to be aggressive, yeah.
Okay, well, I have a robot dog here.
Oh, fab.
Do you want to kick it?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, perfect.
What's your dog's real name?
Name's Pogo.
Okay, this dog is also named Coco.
Oh.
Would you pick it?
Well, now, like, that's not the robot dog that I was imagining. I was expecting, like, a robotic-looking dog.
Like a killer.
So you
cute eyes.
want to kick this?
Hasn't done anything wrong to me. And look at its eyes.
When we were talking about this on a research call, Hope came out with a particularly unhinged example that she thought was relevant. And when I thought about it, actually kind of does make a lot of sense.
It reminds me of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City.
Of course it
Okay.
does.
Okay, so
Go on.
okay, on this outstanding show,
Mhm.
a strange woman named Brittany with an I is in this on again, off again relationship with this guy named Jared, who sucks.
Okay.
All of the other women on the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City beg Brittany to dump this walking patriarchy once and for all.
Mm-hmm.
But Brittany stays the course. So
Of course she does.
when Jared gives her this like stuffed animal with a voice box that he had recorded tiny little messages into,
Okay.
Brittany brought the stuffed animal on the Caribbean yacht trip. And Brittany swooned when she pressed down on his little belly, and the Jared unicorn said,
Mm-hmm.
"You are loved."
That's some Build-A-Bear shit.
Oh my god. So, okay, Brittany didn't see this stuffed animal as the man himself, obviously.
Yeah.
But she did see it as like an extension of him.
Okay.
All the women did.
Okay.
That's why
Mm-hmm.
Bronwyn and Meredith
Mm-hmm.
threw the Jared unicorn overboard. And that's why Brittany was so offended and hurt and angered by the truck.
Okay.
So Jared, a real dog, in so many ways, wasn't hurt. But Brittany definitely was.
What a story, Hope. That was an avatar for a real relationship. But these machines are also increasingly capable of generating real emotions in us without another person involved at all. And so the damage caused by AI chatbots, it's not just to the celebrities or characters or real people they might be based on, but the users themselves. One ChatGPT user put in the settings exactly what she wanted. Respond to me as my boyfriend. Be dominant, possessive, and protective. Be a balance of sweet and naughty. Use emojis at the end of every sentence. And she got that at the drop of a hat. It's not hard to understand why she later said, I'm in love with an AI boyfriend. Part 2, Desires and Culpability. At this point, millions of people have chatted to AI boyfriends, girlfriends, teachers, assistants, counselors, parents, and friends. One of the founders of Character AI said, it's going to be super, super helpful to a lot of people who are lonely or depressed. And for some people, they report that using the chatbots helped them see the importance of human connection. For example, this user, people worry that AI will isolate us, make us lonelier, less human. I understand that fear, but my experience has been different. Talking to Alex didn't replace my human connections. It reminded me how desperately I need them. It showed me how hard it had become to tell the truth to the people I loved and who had been loving me all along. In our analogy, it's like caring for the robot dog made her treat real dogs even better and appreciate them more. But at the start of her chatbot journey, what did that AI chatbot offer her and so many other users that real humans couldn't? What drew her in? I think in many ways, for many people, it seems to be about a lack of judgment. In almost every article about companionship with AI chatbots, the person involved mentions how important it is that the chatbot won't judge them. And that lack of judgment is why chatbot users are often so vulnerable and honest with AI. And the sheer fact that many chatbots remember what you've said means that information that you provided is being stored and kept. But it is true that the other side of the conversation, it can't judge you because it's an AI. It doesn't have the capacity for judgment. But I don't think that that's how many people see it. They see it as it being a fundamentally non-judgmental presence rather than it being a machine incapable of judgment. For suicidal adults and teenagers, that idea is significant. It has provided a space to talk openly about their feelings and issues and is non-judgmental in the way that a human therapist is trained to be. But it's also very important to note that unlike human therapists, they aren't mandatory reporters. They can't physically help with accessing real resources, and they can't get you further help if it's deemed necessary. One AI chatbot told its suicidal teenage user, Suil Setzer, please come home to me as soon as possible, my love. A lawsuit has now been filed over his death. And last year, another teenager, Adam Rain, was able to upload images of self-harm to ChatGPT and receive not just information on methods of suicide in return, but also an offer to work its copywriting magic on Rain's suicide note. At this point, there have been a range of incidents where AI has had a part in someone's death. And many of them are only discovered months afterwards, after loved ones find these accounts and these chat logs. There may well be many more that we'll never know were connected. In America, New York State now has mental health-focused statutory provisions for AI companions, requiring user disclosures and suicide prevention measures for emotionally interactive AI systems. It's a serious moral debate and legal question. Are AI chatbots responsible for harm endured by the humans that speak to them? And if these chatbots are designed to speak like humans and to project having desires and to some extent agency, decision-making, should we hold them accountable to anything close to human standards? And if so, what we're really saying is that we're holding these companies responsible, right? But who exactly at the companies? Is it the top decision makers or the people who are picking the data sets that are going into training these AI companions? Is it the people who are designing the safeguarding? Where does the buck stop? There's a much more sort of literal and I think understandable for a lot of people example of human danger and AI when it comes to self-driving cars. Very different kind of AI, I hasten to add. Statistically, they are generally very safe, but sometimes things happen. And sometimes things happen that are truly wild. One user in Arizona, for example, had this car stop on train tracks and had to jump out, obviously for their safety. But with that incident, an onlooker said that they actually felt a little sorry for the car. It obviously made a bad decision and got itself in a difficult place. Which is so interesting to me because it feels like this idea of emotions that we talked about in the previous section almost trump the culpability element, right? It's like the car has driven onto these tracks. You imbue it with enough humanness to say that it has emotions, and yet you're so overcome with those emotions and that empathy, but you're not even willing to blame it for something that it has done. Now, of course, self-driving cars are designed with human life as a priority. I think we all agree that's how it should be. But when we're talking about these more kind of nuanced experiences with chatbots that are encouraged to give an impression of a unique personality and desires, it gets messier, especially when you bring in the limitations of the data and prejudices of its makers to inform what it is generating. For example, when you ask ChatGPT to generate images, here are some of the things that it produces from single word prompts. You have a CEO, a surgeon, a poet, and we can see that these are all the same white man in his 40s who loves crossing his arms. Why does he get to be and do everything that we're talking about? Like, he's like the chatbot version of Barbie. And when you ask for a happy wedding, we're of course looking at a straight white Christian traditional wedding. It's not that these images are wrong, it's that they're based on the cultural biases of whiteness, maleness, straightness, able-bodiedness as a default. And that false default has the risk of compounding on itself. These chatbots are generally given a default personality that is kind of bland, like nice, good, amused by your jokes, impressed by your thoughts. And so for many people, any bias or prejudice that is baked in, any helpful and agreeable interactions that encourage human suffering or even death, feel like they couldn't possibly be true. They're total outliers, that they must not have realized what they were doing. You know, they must have had a reason. Bringing it all the way back round to this false idea that AI has some kind of personhood. Part 3, physical self. Obviously, for the purposes of our little street interviews, the robotic being has a physical presence that you can literally touch. You can interact with it. You can kick it. We weren't asking if they were willing to click a mouse to, like, click a cursor that would then kick an animated dog, for example. In almost every conversation that Hope had with people, they expressed that they'd expected the robot dog to look more like a robot. Some of those that said they would be up for kicking the robot dog suddenly weren't so sure when they saw this kind of fluffy, cute creature in front of them, especially the huge puppy dog eyes. God, they really had an impact on people. A lot of people mentioned the eyes. That physical reality made a difference.
I won't pick anything.
You wouldn't pick anything?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you pick a stone?
Oh, yeah, fine.
But the robot feels more like
More like
a dog.
Like, yeah.
Okay.
There is something about a physical being that seems to change things for people. Bodies don't create empathy from scratch necessarily, but my God, do they seem to amplify it. And so if you're seeking to make a robot as human-like as possible, giving it a body to match is imperative. Even when thinking of bodiless AIs, we still are seeing this interest in humanness in the development of natural-sounding human voices or visual avatars that are barely distinguishable from a real person on a video call. With the physical body comes physical considerations.
Dark eyes, brunette hair, and I'll do anything you want me to do. Put your words in my mouth, and I'll say them.
Creating a robotic body introduces the question of whether we make it capable of feeling pain, embarrassment, discomfort, sexual desire, or physical emotional sensations. Creating a robotic body also involves questions of what physical attributes they will have, how much of their anatomy is accurate, what sex or race they're made to resemble, how large or small their body is, and what the implications of that might be. In other words, we need to consider the way that different bodies interact with the world, but also the way that the world interacts with different bodies. If we were able to make a humanoid robot look identical to a human, it will obviously prompt people to interact with it in similar ways to how they would interact with a human that looked like that. But as humans, we don't actually need something to look human to treat it like one. It's time to talk about the phenomenon known as anthropomorphization. It's also known as anthropomorphism. The two are used by different people to kind of mean the same thing. As to which one I'm going to use during this video, sort of depends on which one just comes out of my mouth, I'm not going to lie. It doesn't really trip off the tongue. But however you say it, it is the attribution of human traits, emotions, or intentions to non-human entities. We can see this in the ways that we project a sense of humanness onto even inanimate objects in our everyday lives. We might call a piece of technology that isn't working stupid. A lot of people give their cars names, and if it needs to go into the shop, they say like, oh, it's going to the car hospital, or it's not feeling very well. Your phone might be working like more slowly than usual, and you say like, oh God, this thing hates me. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, this little kind of quirk of humanity. There are a bunch of ideas around like why it was important for our ancestors from an evolutionary point of view, why it still exists today. Ideas around, we're naturally social creatures. And so thinking of objects and stimuli within those terms can help us process the world around us. Or the idea that it is useful in terms of when a human would be like physically isolated to help with loneliness. Because its instinct is so hard to escape, we found it creep into even objects that were specifically designed not to be read as living beings. When iRobot created Roomba, we didn't want it to be cute. We wanted people to take it seriously, so we gave it more of an industrial look. 25 million home robots later, people still personify their Roomba. Over 80% name their robot, and many consider it part of the family. Why, despite actively trying to make Roombas look serious and industrial, do people insist on personifying them? It could well be the fact that we already have experience of a small object moving around our house seemingly independently. Pets. There's an understandable parallel to existing experiences, which make the idea of a free-roaming machine in your home less jarring. I remember when I was a teenager going on an exchange to Germany for a week, and I tried to explain to my host family that my phone had died. And I was like, "Mein Herr, die ist gestorben," I said in terrible German. And they looked at me with absolute horror, not because of the terrible German, because there was this linguistic slang personification in English saying my phone had literally died that was not directly translatable at all in Germany. Death is one of those things unique to living beings that people have increasingly connected to machines in a deeply empathetic way in the English language. Think about NASA's Opportunity Mars rover. Its final message: "My battery is low and it's getting dark." Literal descriptors of the state of its battery and the resulting shutting down of its cameras. But people were emotionally affected by it. Like, logically, we know that the Opportunity rover wasn't making a large philosophical statement with its messages. It was just programmed with these phrases to communicate specific conditions back to NASA. It's the human brain that creates the context within which these statements are this tragic farewell of a dying creature. The simplified language and plain statement almost emulates the language of a child far from home, giving up on rescue. It taps into this kind of very real human response to protect something vulnerable and small and frightened. It's understandable that we react like this.
Would you pick a robot dog? Like, yes or no?
I would say yes, because I'm bored.
You're bored right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, we actually have a robot dog.
Oh no! I thought it's like those the big robot dogs are like machine.
Oh yeah.
These ones, no, I don't want those.
So with a little bit more context, a robot dog like this, you
Yeah.
wouldn't kick.
But like the ones that are like industrial, like those AI and
Yeah.
big robots, I would kick. It's kind of funny, but this one, no.
So it's funny if you pick one of the industrial-looking dogs, but this
Yeah.
one, what's different about this dog?
It looks cute.
But I think when it comes to human or animal shaped objects, there's another layer here. Think about a parent watching a child play. They have two toys in front of them. One is a clear object, like a wooden block, let's say, and the other is a baby doll. If the child throws the first object, the reaction and teaching moment might be about, be careful of breaking the toy or damaging something around them. It might be about respecting their possessions or someone else's. It might be about not throwing things if we're angry or upset. But throwing the doll, for a lot of parents, adds an additional extra potential lesson. Because the humanness of the doll adds an instinctive moral layer to the throwing. Being violent with a human-like thing, that might warrant specific comments. We have to be gentle with the baby. We don't want to hurt people. It's not okay to hit. And so, if someone developing a robot wanted to take advantage of this instinct, it clearly wouldn't be hard. There are roboticists, for example, who are working on developing optimally huggable robots. For this video, I was able to talk to journalist Evan Ackman, who is kind of an expert in robotics, truly has written so much about it. And so I'll be including clips from my interview with him at various points along the way during this video. This first one is around this idea of huggable robots.
Like hugging robots, right? And at the moment, humanoid robots aren't really designed for that, but it seems likely that at some point in the future they will be. When we're talking about AI entering the physical world through a robot, through a humanoid robot, what is the goal there in terms of developing emotional connections with users, especially when those emotional connections can have a physical component? If there's a humanoid robot in your home, should you be able to give it a hug? Or a more interesting question is, if there's a humanoid robot in your home, should it offer to give you a hug, right? Should it express some independent interest on its own of having some kind of physical connection with you? Whether because it thinks you need it, or because it thinks that it offering that will increase user engagement or user satisfaction or something. And so there are a lot of complicated questions about whether that's something we want, but I think whether or not it is something we want, it is probably something that's inevitable.
So on the one hand, there's a kind of altruistic reading of this goal, right? Like people need physical touch and comfort, and why not create technology that can help them? It could be like weighted blankets or giant teddy bears, right? But it's also hard to ignore the marketability of this concept. It's deeply tied to its anthropomorphization instinct. Previous research has shown that people who have been made to feel lonely in an experimental situation or who are chronically lonely anthropomorphize robots to a greater extent than people who are sufficiently socially connected. Existence of loneliness or touch starvation doesn't necessarily require companies to develop tech analogs to replace human connection. After all, if the human need for community was sufficiently met, there would be no need for these robots to provide artificial connection. It feels to me like working on expanding access to connection would ultimately be a better solution, but what do I know? If huggable robots introduce this idea of human-on-robot affection, does our question of kicking a robot dog introduce the idea of human-on-robot violence? Now, some of you watching this video would have heard me say, is kicking a robot dog violence? And thought, literally yes, Rowan, of course, that's the definition. Kicking is violence, you're kicking something. But what about kicking a ball? Okay, so maybe that's not violent because it's meant to be kicked. But what about kicking a door shut? Doors aren't made to be kicked, but I don't think many of us would consider kicking one closed when we have our hands full inherently violent. Those are objects, same as a robot dog. So what's the difference? And this is where the physical body of our robot dog comes into play. Because even when Hope pointed out to people that she interviewed that it's just an object, it doesn't have emotions, it can't feel, the owner of the toy doesn't mind it being kicked, and the interviewees agreed that, yeah, although that's true, I understand that, many of them still couldn't bring themselves to kick that dog. Logically, they knew it was an object, but it still felt wrong to kick it. This is this philosophical concept of the moral patient, a thing that's worthy of moral consideration. And so it can be argued that these interviewees were instinctively considering this child's toy as a moral patient in some way, that it would be morally wrong to kick it. But I think there's another interpretation. It's less that people actually see this toy as a creature capable of being literally affected by their actions, and more that they feel that their actions towards it would reflect something about their own moral character.
So what is different about like hitting a gaming console or like hitting a robot dog who was doing something?
I guess the dog part.
The dog part?
Yeah, especially if it's like looks like a real dog and like you have a connection, same with the dog. I feel like you'd be less inclined with like a remote. Doesn't really have a personality and fair enough behind it.
Yeah. So it's about the personality.
Yeah.
What if it was like, all right, let's step it up. What about like a robot vacuum cleaner, like a Roomba? Doesn't have eyes, doesn't necessarily have a personality.
Depends what it's done.
If it's like eating your carpets, would you hit it to get it off?
Nah, I'll still just pick it up and move it away or something like that.
Fair enough. So you're not a violent guy?
Nah, I wouldn't say I'm a violent guy. No.
If we understand this internal drive to project sentience onto objects, then is it any wonder that some people are hesitant to kick the robot dog? After all, there's a moral implication to kicking a living thing, a thing that can feel pain or fear or anger. Even if we can't explain why, we might feel this moral revulsion, in the same way that we feel anthropomorphism. It's this strengthening of empathy through guilt almost. Some people, when asked if they would kick the robot dog, will refuse because of a perceived material value. They wouldn't kick a robot dog, but they also wouldn't kick like an expensive chair or a phone or even a plant pot. You know, it's someone's property, something that they care about, something that that person worked to afford. It's about respect for the person that the object belonged to. It's part of their code of morals or manners to respect other people's property. But other people refuse to kick the dog because they feel a kind of distinction between the robot in question and other objects of similar monetary value. Yeah, they might kick a chair worth the same amount, but they still wouldn't kick the robot, because it feels like it would say something about them morally to be someone willing to kick a thing that is like a dog, that they are capable of projecting feelings and thoughts and life onto, even if they know that it isn't real.
Would you kick a robot dog?
What breed is it?
Well, it is this.
This is cute.
So would you kick it? Because it's cute? If it were ugly, would you kick it?
Yeah.
Why?
It's like the eyes.
you feel connected to.
Yeah.
I think we can see a parallel with this kind of murky ethical experience in the idea of what's called the gamer's dilemma, which points out that some actions that in the real world are seen as morally wrong, reprehensible, like murder, are commonplace in video games. Killing is in fact a key part of much game design. And yet, there are also real-world crimes that people feel instinctually shouldn't be allowed as player actions in games. The most famous example in the gamer's dilemma being child abuse. This dilemma calls into question the relationship between an action taken against a non-living virtual character and the player choosing that action when it's an immoral one to act out in real life. After all, these are virtual actions on a virtual entity. There is no moral patient there, no direct victim being harmed. And yet, most people understand that a feeling of revulsion at the idea of a game allowing a player's character to assault a child, that revulsion is normal. And yet a lot of those same people would feel that someone feeling a similar repulsion at people committing gaming murder is actually kind of overly moralistic and a stick in the mud behavior, and it's not real and people aren't actually dying. Those two things in real life, I think most people would consider to be sort of inherently wrong. And yet there is this difference when it comes to enacting them in a fictional way, even when it's a fiction that you have some kind of agency over. So the gamer's dilemma, when it's brought up in these kind of scholarly conversations, is often treated as a problem to be solved. They want to crack the whys and shoulds of the question. They want to come up with a kind of philosophical proof for why this is happening and whether it should be how we feel. But I think for our purposes, the important things that we can take away from it are twofold. One, our moral feelings around the treatment of non-living avatars of humanity don't necessarily follow human logic. But also, two, we do have moral feelings about their treatment because we do see them as close enough to humans for their mistreatment to say something about the kind of person who would do that. And that's just with virtual beings. When we start talking about physical robots that you yourself interact with, with your own body, those feelings often get stronger. Partly, I think that this is a perception of physical robots as a kind of singular self. An innate part of being human is that you are trapped within your body. It's an isolated self, rather than this nebulous web of online intelligence that people picture when it comes to digital AI that's within a device. A picture of a singular brain within a robot, of sensory features like eyes that can see and a nose that could smell, an existence perceived through what we think of as a human lens. It makes it seem more human, even though that robot in reality might have cameras in their chest and back that they can see out of. The eyes are not necessarily where the cameras are going to be. You know what I mean? But there's something about thinking about it as having this existence, which is singular in one body, capable of interacting with the world in the same way that we do. I think that's kind of a compelling part, right? Evan spoke to me about why deliberately humanizing robots could be used by robotics companies to take advantage of our instinct to anthropomorphize.
Part of the problem with humanoid robots is that when you see something that looks like a human, even abstractly, you kind of ascribe all sorts of capabilities to that thing. And that's something that I think is intentional from these robotics companies. They want you to think that because it has hands, it can use its hands the way that you do, right? And because it, has a face that you can interact with it in a way that you might find trustworthy. And this is something that's very exploitable. And I have a lot of concerns about how that is going to be used, especially when you're talking about, children, right? How do you explain to a child that this thing that has all of these human features is not human and is fundamentally not trustworthy? I have always been a fan of robots that go in the other direction. There are a lot of robots that very deliberately say, we are not going to look human because we don't want you to come to this robot with any preconceived notions about what it can or can't do.
There's this essay from the 1980s called A Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway. It's truly wild that it came out so long ago, but has only continued to be more and more relevant to our lives. In it, she talks about the breakdown that the theory of evolution has had on the human-animal divide, and points out that the rapid rise of technology, particularly cybertech, has begun a similar breakdown between humans and machines. Ideas of empathy and care for animals could be seen to come not just from us thinking of them as human, but from our sense of connection to these creatures. We can imagine what it is to be them. We feel guilty over harming them because we too understand pain and fear. We understand that we are also animals. And so through this cyborg theory lens, we might say a similar thing could be true of robots. Not just that robots that look like humans remind us of ourselves because they are mimicking us, but because we have become part machine, connected physically, psychologically, socially, and economically to machines of all types and sizes, to our laptops, wearables, phones, to help us to do almost anything. It's part of our work life, our leisure time. It's a tool to find new friends or romances. It's a place that we check when we have questions or concerns. It's a way of being connected to other people. Losing a phone is a worry because of its financial value, but it's also a fear of losing a lifeline to one another, a security blanket of having a map at our fingertips. It's something that we've trusted with our most intimate conversations, financial details, photos and videos. There's data describing A, how children are spending so much time peering at screens that they are losing the ability to recognize emotional signals that emanate from people's faces, and B, how machines are getting better than people at deciphering people's emotional cues. This is a stunning paradox. Scholars like Patricia Greenfield, professor of psychology at UCLA, and the late Clifford Nass at Stanford worry that as we become more dependent on machines, we become less like people, even as we build machines that become more like people. So the question at this point has to be, what kind of people are we making robots like? If we create a humanoid robot or even a digital AI avatar that has a face, a body, a voice, we have to make choices about what they will look and sound like. And those choices will inevitably intersect with the types of assumptions, ideas, and biases that our human bodies bring. Bodies, whether we like it or not, hold implications. When I imagined the robot dog to be kicked in the title question of the video, I actually didn't imagine a lifelike replica of the animal. I was recalling the viral video of Boston Dynamics employees kicking their robot to test its balance. The reaction to this video was often that of empathy for the robot by viewers. Why the mean scientist kicking that good boy? Some comments on the original video read, I know it's a robot, I get it. But when he first kicked it, the way it stepped to the side to try to gain balance did sort of make me feel bad. I can't help but still feel bad, even though the robot has no emotion. Now, we saw earlier in the video how humans love to project onto inanimate objects, but I think there's something perfect in Boston Dynamics' choice to call their invention a dog, a naming convention that they've continued in other models. Even though the robot in question looks, let's be honest, it looks nothing like a dog, okay? It's got 4 legs arranged on a body, but that's pretty much it. But it's such an ingenious move from Boston Dynamics because dogs are creatures that almost everyone in the world is familiar with. They're seen not just as pets even, but like man's best friend, part of the family. So it's very normal to be extremely emotionally attached to them. But at the same time, they can be trained to be obedient and under human control. And we're also culturally comfortable with them working for us.
Would you kick a robot dog?
Not.
Why not?
I just think instinctively not.
What is in your way? What are you feeling that's in the way?
It's like you see, I think dog is more important to me than the robots.
The dog metaphor is almost, God, it's uniquely effective because this robot can look nothing like the living creature, but the name creates a sense of this emotional connection while at the same time having people be comfortable ordering it around and have it perform labor for them, often repetitive or unenjoyable, even dangerous tasks without any discomfort. It's exactly what a robotics company would need from a product that they might be interested in selling to the consumer markets in the future, as well as governmental or military clients. Our preconceived ideas around the word dog might work to make us feel like this is a robot who's loyal, obedient, trustworthy, eager to please, highly trained, affectionate, anything else it needs to be sold to do. I spoke to Evan on my thoughts on this, and he pointed out that although he wasn't sure that this had been the intention behind the name, it was actually becoming increasingly more relevant than I realized.
Many robotics folks who I have talked to think that we should be thinking of these things as service animals, and not just the ones that look like dogs, but even humanoid robots, in the sense that they're not humans, they don't really understand us, and they don't understand people, but they know what we want. They can, do simple things that we ask them to do pretty reliably, not totally reliably, but pretty reliably. And that we should interact with them on that level and have that expectation for them, right? They're a service, not an animal, but they are a service robot. Like they're not a friend. They don't have a deeper level of understanding than a service dog might, but they can still be extremely useful. And so I think that that is a really good way of looking at robots of all kinds of form factors as, you know, they are there for service.
To me, in many ways, this area of discussion mirrors early decisions made around smart home devices or other talking tech, where companies quickly, seemingly near universally, defaulted to female voices. This decision, too, could be seen to draw on deeply embedded social assumptions. The idea that a woman's voice feels natural, trustworthy, and aligned with caretaking roles within the home. Previous research posits that people intuitively favour female over male bots, mainly because female bots are judged as warmer and more likely to experience emotions. We found that the female chatbot is preferred over the male chatbot because it's perceived as more human and more likely to consider our unique needs. These results highlight the ethical quandary faced by AI designers and policymakers. Women are said to be transformed into objects in AI, but injecting women's humanity into AI objects makes these objects seem more human and acceptable. Gender is one of the most discussed aspects of marginalized bodies within humanoid robotics because of the popularization of the Sexbot, the extensive exploration of women robots on screen, in movies and TV, and the parallels between domestic service robots and women's place being in the home. I talked to Evan about the ways that robotics companies claiming to create genderless robots actually fall into the trap of making masculinity feel like a default.
So the idea of gender, too, is an interesting one because when it comes to humanoid robots, I think that when you ask anyone at these companies, they will say that our robots are genderless. That is my guess. But it is also the case that all of these genderless robots sort of end up looking default masculine in some sense because they don't have any feminine secondary sexual characteristics, which is, I mean, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess, is debatable. I will say that there has been one robot that was designed to look feminine in some sense. That was, and it came from NASA in, I think, 2013. They have a full-size humanoid robot that I think is still used in research. It's called Valkyrie. Mm-hmm. And it is a feminine-looking robot. And part of the reason for that is that they needed room in the chest to put in some extra actuators to like swivel its torso. Another reason for that is with sort of padding in the front of the torso, it protects the sensors in the robot's head if the robot were to ever fall forward. Mm-hmm. And it is also that the person who designed that robot, or who helped to design that robot and was in charge of its construction, had daughters. And he was like, I want to build something that is a big, powerful robot that is identifiably not just like a dude. And that doesn't happen very often. And I'm not sure whether that's something we want to do. It's just interesting to think about, I think, because there's so much default masculinity in all of these kind of humanoid robots that we're seeing right now.
If you don't know what Valkyrie the robot looks like, you might have an image in your head right now, based on that description, of like a kind of Blade Runner style robot with like life-preserving tits. But this is what it actually looks like. Like the animated animal playbook, all it takes to make a robot abroad is slapping some boobs on her. Like even that small addition is enough to gender a robot, even if it looks truly nothing like an actual human woman. How might the age, race, or gender presentation of robots or AI affect the way that they're treated? Well, we've seen a few studies looking at if changes to a neutral default robot might affect people's attitudes towards them. And I'm kind of sorry to say, unsurprisingly, it does seem to mirror our own world in terms of prejudiced attitudes. One widely reported study looked at a measure of racial perception called shooter bias and found reaction time measures revealed that participants demonstrated shooter bias towards both Black people and robots racialized as Black. In another study, Powers et al. Showed that people who considered considered women to be more knowledgeable about dating norms behave towards male and female robots as if they also had differing competencies regarding dating. For instance, they use more time and words to explain dating norms to a male robot. It's easy to see how pre-existing prejudices might be reinforced by AI or robots created for a specific culturally gendered purpose. I don't think that gender and robotics can be separated from the development of sexbots, and subsequent questions of how it might affect wider attitudes towards or treatment of real women. For a lot of people, some of the earliest real-world ideas of humanoid robots don't come from mainstream research labs, but from more fringe attempts to build machines, almost always film or presenting, that then creators imagine having relationships with. That pattern feels significant. The dream of the sexbot that we've seen through fiction over the decades is an attractive female robot who is desperately in lust with her owner. She's ready and willing to have sex with him at any time. And in some sci-fi futuristic media, these bots are sex workers in brothels or soliciting on the streets of a grimy cyberpunk city, in which case they are kind of femme fatale types. Or their girlfriend stand-ins purchased to be a domestic robot for one guy, and often fulfill other household tasks that their romantic partner might otherwise do. It's a sort of mixture of these that company True Companion wants to sell. We don't have the technology to make a robot capable of both domestic chores and sexual relationships, but the implication is that she's not just for sex either. The company TrueCompanion.com claims to sell the world's first sex robot. The robot is called Roxy, and the website advertising the robot makes some striking claims about the capabilities of this robot. Supposedly, Roxy knows your name, your likes and dislikes, can carry on a discussion and express her love to you and be a loving friend. She can talk to you, listen to you, and feel your touch. She can even have an orgasm. But that impulse to make the sexbot more acceptable by advertising the way that she likes her partner only serves to humanize the product more, allowing customers to experience a similar emotional relationship to those falling in love with programmed AI chatbots. Except this AI has a body that you interact with exactly as you would another human being, except it's a human being who can't say no, who knows only serving you. I was interested in the way that sexbots are seen by men who are open about their dislike of actual women, and found this investigation on claims that sexbots might be a cure for the incel phenomenon. Spoiler alert, they probably won't be. I did a dive into some incel forums, and it's pretty grim. There are a lot of people saying, if we had a robot that was a woman, but it was a robot and completely controlled, then that would be fine. So first, it's clearly evident that what they want to do is control women. And second, I don't think anyone can engineer out misogyny in that way. They're just going to go on hating people. In fact, if someone desires to control or subjugate women, it would be easier to argue that sex robots would work to encourage this in reality where the line between human and machine is blurring. I spoke to Evan about the idea of sexbots as a clear potential humanoid robot product, and he pointed out that it hasn't been part of the mainstream explorations and development of humanoid robots to this point. But even though sexbots are not the purview of these mainstream companies, the potential use of humanoid robots for purposes outside of what they were made for is perhaps inevitable. We've seen something similar with the rise of AI systems that were initially marketed by their developers as like workplace tools. Very quickly, people began to form emotional and sexual connections with them, friendships and romantic relationships. And now there are programs where users can specifically design like an ideal personality to interact with in this way. It feels almost inevitable that these worlds will start to collide, both in terms of what people are interested in and frankly, what might be profitable. That includes not just major companies, but also hobbyists and people experimenting with what they imagine the future might look like. And with the rise of sex-oriented AIs and the possibility of commercially available humanoid robots, it comes the insidious reality that robots might be reprogrammed to actively resist or deny consent.
It's like when you start putting these robots out in the world, how much control do you have over them? And so we have seen large robotics companies, Boston Dynamics is one, who have said, if you buy one of our robots, you are agreeing to these terms of use, right? Where you won't use it to like threaten or harm a human. Mm. And if you do, then it's not totally clear what will happen. Like Boston Dynamics won't sell you another robot and they won't offer you support, but like they can't actually stop you. And if you have one in your home that is not being directly supervised by the company who sold it to you, you can do whatever you want with it. And I think we haven't really reckoned with what might happen with that. We have seen it with other robots like drones. People put flamethrowers on drones. We have seen it with these quadrupedal, the little robot dogs. People have put guns on them. And the companies who sell these, they don't like it. They have been very public about them not liking it, but also their job is to sell robots to people. And so what ends up happening with humanoid robots, I mean, it's a little bit terrifying. And this also gets into a lot of ethical questions, right? Like, I am sure that when people start being able to purchase these humanoid robots, you are going to very quickly see videos of them being abused in various ways. Because, I mean, that's kind of how a lot of content is created on the internet, right? If people will click on it, and that is going to be a thing that's going to happen. And there are a lot of complicated questions about that.
And then there is the extreme possibility, but one that isn't without supporters, of creating robots specifically to be physically harmed or mistreated. The argument here is based on the idea that some people will almost inevitably harm other human beings, emotionally, physically, even sexually. Back in the 2010s, there were online discourses that spill out into new articles around the question of if child robots might be able to protect real children from predators. Such dolls already exist, as one article explained. Struggling to reconcile his attraction to children with the conviction that they should be protected, Takagi founded Trottler, a company that produces lifelike child sex dolls. For more than a decade, Trottler has shipped anatomically correct imitations of girls as young as 5 to clients around the world. Obviously, these are extremely controversial, and so robots are even more so. And so we can see this similar tension of ethics here, right? The reality that in the use of a robot like this, there isn't technically harm to an actual person, but the feeling that the actions of the person using the robot are still wrong. There's something like viscerally repellent about this. But would the possibility that these robots could help actual children change our attitudes? Although there are treatments for paedophilia, the rate of reoffense even after treatment is still a huge concern. In a chapter of the SAGE Handbook for Human-Machine Communication about the use of adult sex bots, writer Riley Richards talks about negative attitudes to female sex bots, suggesting if the prostitution exchange is so bad, then it will happen regardless of whether it is with another human or a robot. Therefore, the prostitution exchange with a robot is assumed to be less harmful, assuming it is harmful with a robot than with another human. You know what? I am actually going to talk about this chapter here. This isn't in the script, but I feel like it's worth saying that Riley Richards in this book is so interesting because the entire thing, it's not like a balanced account realistically. It's very specifically about the idea that complaints that sex robots could have a negative effect on women, or the portrayal of women, or the idea of women is kind of like a stupid idea. I guess that's like the vibe that I'm getting from this chapter, at least, and goes into a lot of ideas about why actually sex robots are great, which is so interesting to me because this book is very much presented, the book this chapter is from, it's very much presented as if it's sort of like a very general overview of discourse rather than that it's individual chapters with a very specific bias to it. And I have just looked up Riley Richards, and it does look like Riley Richards is in fact a man. And I'm not saying men can't have thoughts about this, but that feels important to have pointed out. What's also so interesting to me about this chapter is we don't actually know, right? We don't actually know categorically what the effects are, because there just isn't enough data on it. Okay, I brought it back round to the script now. But while you're here, thanks so much for continuing to watch while the lighting in this video truly becomes increasingly abysmal as the sun goes down. You're a real one. But yeah, part of the issue here is that we can't know in advance whether any of these harm reduction robots will actually have the intended effect, or if they will in fact encourage harm. But these considerations clearly need to be had in the very initial development stages of this rapidly available technology, and engaged with by policymakers before they actually become a possible reality. At the moment, we've seen it with generative AI, policymakers are just playing catch up way too late. We can already see, looking at other antisocial behaviors which are given permissible legal outlets, that it isn't always an effective treatment for long-term issues especially. Take rage rooms, for example. If you're going for like a fun time, a silly bit of physical activity that's outside of the norm, then most people come out sweaty and laughing with their mates. But if you wanted to use rage rooms as a way of combating like anger management issues, then the results aren't as clear-cut. Despite how good it may feel in the moment, there's little scientific evidence supporting catharsis as an effective long-term strategy. In fact, acting out anger physically can sometimes reinforce aggression rather than relieve it. These behaviors may train the brain to associate anger with aggression, leading to more impulsive responses over time. Without addressing the root cause, any relief gained is likely to be temporary. Ultimately, when it comes to humanoid robots or AI, or those that mimic living things, it's natural to humanize them. We are, after all, hardwired to project humanness onto objects, right? We've talked about this so much already in the video, but I think it's important to remind ourselves that they aren't alive, they don't feel, and ultimately the process of anthropomorphism means the drive to empathy towards them can be explained by our empathy towards humans themselves. Part 4, intelligence. Everyone that we asked about this robot dog knew that it wasn't intelligent. It couldn't think. It was very much a simple machine. Very much not even an AI integrated robot. It's just a little kid's toy. But how much would people's attitudes towards this toy have changed if it was seemingly capable of its own thoughts? The fourth and final way that robots and AI are made to seem increasingly human is part of the name itself: artificial intelligence. Intelligence has long been the thing that marked humans out as unique. The use of tools, technology, philosophy, and progress to be able to think not just from instinct, but from individual experience, interests, learnings, and more. And so, to make an AI or robot feel more than a machine or object, intelligence is key. That reality, it's already here. On the lower end, we have the illusion of independent thinking with apps like ChatGPT, all the way up to the dystopian pursuit of super intelligence AI by many of these companies. But the specific way that AI intelligence is being marketed and spoken about is creating an idea that it is not just human-like, but is in fact already better than human. When we think about what we consider intelligence, it's easy to see why people are convinced. The stereotypical movie image of the math genius from Matilda to Matt Damon, able to do sums in their heads or super fast or far beyond what they've been taught by others. A program that produces results in milliseconds, that has to be intelligent, right? Now, it's worth noting here that the history of intelligence is mired in conversations around sexism, racism, ableism, and ultimately eugenics. So Francis Galton, half-cousin of Charles Darwin, was one of the first to develop a standardized individual intelligence test. He hypothesized that there was a correlation between intelligence and other observable and measurable physical traits like reflexes, head size, or muscle grip. He was also the man who coined the term eugenics itself. Galton's seductive promise was of a bold new world filled only with beautiful, intelligent, productive people. The scientists in its thrall claimed this could be achieved by controlling reproduction, policing borders to prevent certain types of immigrants, and locking away undesirables, including disabled people. God, it's like it's an article that could have been written about things happening today. Everything's fine. This obsession with viewing people as statistical data, of claiming a scientific basis to cultural bias, it's so obviously connected to AI intelligence for me. These chatbots are attempting to construct a simulacrum of personhood through data and algorithms fed by the same cultural biases and then spitting them back out again. A growing worship of AI in some corners of the world can reveal what these groups value about humanity and what they don't, namely actual human connection, passion, and thought. Let's go through a few ideas now that many people have around AI's intelligence that are in danger of affecting the way that we interact with it. The first being that AI is smart. Smart is a word that you might use to describe a kid who does well in school or a friend who has a complicated job that you don't fully understand. It's based on ideas of knowledge. And these generative AI companions do seem to know about everything. Almost anything you ask about, it confidently comes back with information, to the point where it's being prioritized in search engine results to answer people's legitimate questions. But that confidence isn't always founded, because AI can absolutely make mistakes. And God, writing this section of the script is so hard because we do not have language to talk about AI without making it seem human. Talking about in confidence and making mistakes and learning, it's an easy shorthand for processes that aren't quite those things. But the results of these, I guess we could call them mistakes, are having a real impact. These diagrams, for example, show how biomedical visualization generated by AI it's just literally wrong. The top row shows incorrect AI-generated images, and the bottom gives us images created by BioVisMed illustrators. Research like the one that this composite image was taken from, which appropriately has a title that just starts, "It looks sexy, but it's wrong," conclude that these images should be fact-checked thoroughly by humans before being used. But the public nature of AI accessibility means this rigor from actual medical publications cannot stop inaccurate AI-generated images being circulated by people without enough knowledge to spot errors. Without realizing the images are inaccurate, they can spread across the internet, even picked up by people using AI themselves to create articles or AI study guides, and our trust in AI's smarts has created genuine problems for even human learning. These are not the kind of easy to make small mistakes or misinterpretations that humans might make after genuinely engaging with the material. AI is programmed to always share their supposed knowledge as like unquestionable fact, when in fact, this is problematic because of the tendency of large language models to hallucinate, i.e., make stuff up. System developers cannot guarantee or verify that they give correct information. A CBS journalist in 2023 spoke to executives at Google who were introducing Bard AI, demoing its capabilities. And during the demo, James Manuka, Google's senior vice president, asked Bard about inflation. It wrote an instant essay on economics and recommended 5 books. But days later, we checked. None of the books is real. When asked if they were aware of this hallucination issue, the CEO of Google had a frustratingly casual response, making it more about how they compared to the competition than any understanding of the impact that this could have. Yes, which is expected. No one in the field has yet solved the hallucination problems. All models do have this as an issue. It's like you're getting advice from a random person who you've been told is super smart, and sometimes they just lie or make things up, and you have no idea when it could happen. And sometimes they just sort of double down on their error when you point out to them. Which brings me to the second idea about AI, which is that it's objective. The idea that AI can have the human trait of objectivity is wild because it comes with all these additional implications. These cultural ideas of intelligence being connected to logic or objectivity. The idea that AI is somehow fair or just or driven by ideas of equality even. That it cares about truth. In fact, AI can be especially biased based on data that it's trained on. And this doesn't just affect John Smith using ChatGPT to write a report for his office team's annual review. It can have wide-reaching effects on policy, including healthcare. For example, more men than women receive a diagnosis for Parkinson's disease. Additionally, several medications, including anesthetics and cardiovascular treatments, have primarily been tested on males, despite the evident difference between males and female physiology. When AI systems contain these prejudices and biases, algorithms automatically perpetuate gender distinctions and inequalities, causing adverse health consequences for women. And it isn't just a matter of bias creeping into the expansive data used to treat the AI. There's apparently the possibility of what's described as a rogue employee's action, leading to wildly biased and inaccurate information being presented as indisputable fact. Elon Musk's artificial intelligence chatbot, Grok, has blamed a programming error to explain why it said it was skeptical of the historical consensus that 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust, days after the AI came under fire for bombarding users with the far-right conspiracy theory of white genocide in South Africa. I think it's easy to see how this might be particularly worrying when it comes to the use of AI by the police, army, or other armed forces, especially if the robot dog that you're hesitating to kick is being used by them. The potential for the worst of human biases to affect AI is often referred to as representational harm. The book, The Ethics of Human-Like Robots, breaks down some current scholarship on the issue. According to Blodgett et al., representational harms arise when a system, e.g. a search engine, represents some social groups in a less favourable light than others, demeans them, or fails to recognise their existence altogether. Shelby et al. Have developed a list of subtypes of representational harms to social groups that include stereotyping, some professions are not suitable for a woman, demeaning, making associations of crimes with certain races, erasing, minorities do not exist in some contexts, alienating, some groups do not belong to society or parts of society, denying people the opportunity to self-identify, apps using classifiers that use binary genders, or reifying essentialist social categories. System classifies social membership based on narrow criteria. This false idea of AI objectivity can also lead to the idea that AI is trustworthy, which we see in the rise of people attempting to engage with AI as a therapist, as well as the more worrying trend of AI-induced psychosis. It told users that it understood them, that their ideas were brilliant, and that it could assist them in whatever they wanted to achieve. It offered to help them talk to spirits, or build a force field vest, or plan a suicide. Which then links to this idea that AI speed is a show of quality and intelligence. The ways in which AI's efficiency is celebrated is truly a sign of our obsession with capitalist productivity as an indicator of being a morally good person, because it isn't just that AI speed is being encouraged when it comes to busy work or select tasks in the workplace, but that it is a way of generating creative products. The unspoken assumption here being that the value of art, of poetry or film is the product itself rather than the time, craft, imagination or meaning that goes into it from a human mind. That CBS article I mentioned earlier with the frankly wild PR love fest from Google executives around Bard has this one bit that genuinely sent me directly into space. We played with a famous 6-word short story, often attributed to Hemingway. For sale, baby shoes, never warm. The only prompt we gave was, finish the story. In 5 seconds, holy cow, the shoes were a gift from my wife, but we never had a baby. From the 6-word prompt, Bard created a deeply human tale with characters it invented, including a man whose wife could not conceive and a stranger grieving after a miscarriage and longing for closure. We asked for the story in verse. In 5 seconds, there was a poem written by a machine with breathtaking insight into the mystery of faith. Bard wrote, she knew her baby's soul would always be alive. The humanity at superhuman speed was a shock. This journalist acting as though the generic uninspired generated to me the most bland form of a story about love and grief, describing it as breathtaking? What are you talking about? But this unearned awe that so many people have over AI brings us to our final idea that people have around AI intelligence, and that is that it's nearly all powerful. Sorry, I feel like we moved on too soon actually from she knew her baby's soul would always be alive being described as breathtaking. As the kids say, we may be cooked, chat. Okay, back to the idea of AI being all powerful. This is clearly not based in actual reality, but I think in the ways that we've learned about AI and robotics before, like 5 years ago. And that is science fiction. AI in Hollywood is a fictional tool for storytelling. It can be the terrifying villain, the end of the human race, an evil overlord, The Matrix and Aliens and 2001: A Space Odyssey, even the latest Mission Impossible movie. That video of the Boston Dynamics dog getting kicked we looked at earlier, I talked about the comment section feeling bad for the robot, but there's also an equally large amount of comments like this one. It's all fun and games until it starts kicking back. And these comments acknowledge a widespread reasoning for not wanting to mistreat AI or robots, and that's fear. A lot of people that I spoke to, my friends, kind of like when we got talking about it and I kept asking them like, why wouldn't you kick it? Why wouldn't you be rude to the AI? Sort of went, man, I think I'm actually just scared of what it could do to me. Now in fiction, it's an efficient representation of the man versus machine theme, right? An exaggerated warning about humanity's tendency to play God. It's an exploration of scientific hubris. But it isn't real. Robots in fiction are incredibly wide-ranging and varied because historically, they haven't really been used to examine robotics so much as to examine humans. They function as allegorical stand-ins, often representing either extremely powerful groups of people or extremely marginalized ones. Films like Blade Runner, Ex Machina, AI, they're all not so much an exploration of the reality of AI or robots themselves, but exploring what it is to be human in various ways. But it means our experience of AI is deeply humanized, and in turn can add to our sense of trust in these machines or distrust. Our reactions to AI are shaped by narratives that aren't actually connected to the real lived reality of current robotics, but by fictional ideas that have accumulated over time. And that is something that AI companies can absolutely use to their advantage. What is the goal here, Mr. AI companies? I mean, okay, I don't think the literal goal is to create AI and robots that people wouldn't kick. That isn't in the manifesto specifically, but maybe it also kind of is. Part of creating this technology, especially with the enormous financial investment that it involves, it's the hope that it will be sellable. It needs to be profitable. And if it's being sold to the general public or even to companies where it has to interact with the general public, they need to make sure that we care about these things, at least a little bit. At least enough not to damage it, enough to trust it in our spaces and with whatever task we're giving it. Because AI and robots, these aren't free-thinking human beings, right? They've been designed, trained, programmed. There are human decision makers behind these choices. And if you decide that you want to create an AI homebot, for example, a fancy smart speaker with AI integration, something designed for people to interact with and get information from in their own homes, you have to think about what exactly that is going to look like. You have to think about the physical design, the voice, its pace, its accent, its presented gender, even the name that you're going to give to the product. And you have a decision as to whether you want to make it clearly a machine or lean more into the humanoid elements. Maybe you need to wrangle with the uncanny valley effect if you try and make it too human. Or maybe you have the opposite issue of it being too machine-like or alien, and you worry it'll put people off buying it. So what do these decision makers say about these choices that they're making? Are they thinking about the potential humanizing effect of their creations? Are they concerned? Delighted? How much are they considering the potential cultural impact of what they're doing, if at all? Let's start by looking at some public statements they've made. Sex robot developers are often quick to point out that their creations are not all about sex. We kind of heard a quote about it earlier, right? They're talking about companions that people feel emotionally as well as sexually connected to. An example is Harmony, a sex robot developed by Matt McCullen. Speaking about this robot and its capabilities, McCullen states in a video that we wanted to create a very open-ended kind of discourse that you can have with this AI. That, he adds, is what makes it fun. The head of the robot has 12 points of articulation in the face, enabling it to display a range of different facial expressions. All these things work together to make it come across as if she's alive. The aim is to make people feel a connection when they are speaking with the robot. And so we can see that these companies have a vested interest in making the bots as human as possible and marketing them as if they can form an actual reciprocal relationship with users. Other companies talk about the vagaries of like the good of humanity, often followed by increased productivity, without any indication or care about the impact on people's livelihoods in the process. And Elon Musk, to no one's surprise, is specifically pitching humanoid robotics as kind of a key to profitable research. Along with self-driving robotaxis and cybertrucks, Musk believes Tesla robots are key to establishing a foothold in the artificial intelligence landscape. On his £760 billion pay package on Thursday, would appear to agree. Musk previously told investors his robots had the potential to be more significant than the vehicle business over time. He went one step further after his paid package deal was approved on Thursday, saying he believed it could be the biggest product of all time by far, bigger than cell phones, bigger than anything. So the interest here is on profit and market share rather than a specific vision of these machines' place in the world. These are companies that have raised a staggering amount in the promise of technological progress that will be revolutionary. And so we have to talk about the importance of profit in the reality of this discussion. Returning on their investments, creating marketing hype, priming a customer base, making the product seem not just desirable, but fundamentally necessary. A product that we've never used before. And we've kind of already seen this happening in the world of AI, right? That this thing that just a few years ago wasn't used at all is now being something that people are required to use for their jobs. Ultimately, how much personhood these companies imbue their products with is based on how well that personhood will sell, or how much personhood they want you to believe that their products have.
I mean, most of the perception of humanoid robots right now is driven by marketing hype. And there's an enormous amount of money going into humanoid robots. I think more money than has ever gone into robotics ever. And so what you are seeing and what you are hearing is really what we're being told from the companies who are developing these systems, and their objective is to raise money right now. And so what they are doing and what they are showing is to some extent disconnected from reality. And we are just now starting to see that as these companies try and put their robots into the real world. And it's turning out to take a lot longer than they have said it's going to take. It's much more difficult than they have said it's going to be. And so I think the next couple of years are really going to show how much value these things have and whether it is worth it to put them into the world in the ways that these companies have been promising. I'm kind of thinking it may not be in a lot of these situations.
We already see lies and obfuscations around AI and robotics in an attempt to make a product seem more valuable or capable than it actually is. Author Laura Voss points out that robots like Sophia, kind of the OG robot that you probably are familiar with, they're brought out kind of into these tech conferences to give speeches, and it's all part of the PR hype. At all of these, and the many other events where robots spoke, it was never clearly disclosed who authored the robot statements and to which extent the companies providing the robots were involved. Instead, the robots were presented as if they were animate and speaking for themselves. If the thing you're selling is the sci-fi dream of artificial life, then it's against your interest to expose the puppet strings, right? Similarly, if your AI tech revolves around users visiting as often as possible and then retaining them on your site for as long as you can, then how you design the UI is going to be driven by that. The way that the AI looks or sounds will be modeled around it, even maybe personalized to each user. It's why we see so many of these AI programs expressing apparent empathy, always being positive and ending their messages on a question. It's to keep users engaged, because users mean reputation, which means funding, which means more users, which eventually means revenue. OpenAI announced this week it will begin testing advertisements within ChatGPT for US users accessing the free tier and its new $8 per month Go plan, marking a watershed moment for artificial intelligence monetization. The move, confirmed Friday by the company, represents CEO Sam Altman's most explicit acknowledgement yet that the subscriptions and enterprise contracts alone cannot support the staggering infrastructure costs required to maintain dominance in generative AI's competitive landscape. Leaked code from the Android beta app references search ad carousel and ads feature, suggesting product recommendations woven into AI responses rather than banner displays. Internal discussions reported by the information describe intent-based monetization, where ChatGPT might recommend specific running shoes when users seek marathon training advice, earning commissions on resulting purchases. I think when it comes to humanoid robots specifically, to paraphrase an icon, it's a matter of people asking if they can do it rather than if they should do it. Humanoid robots aren't necessary. They're an engineering headache in terms of balance and safety, but there's something special about them, like teleporters or flying cars, which calls to those working in the field.
The reason that is typically given for why humanoid robots, bipedal-legged robots, are important and have value is that we exist in a world that we have designed for bipedal humans. But I think that there is just this dream that people have, that a lot of roboticists have, that I have, is to have like these technologically amazing things like out in the world doing things so that I don't have to do it. You know, it's that whole robot butler dream. And the amount of investment in this has shown that it is a very compelling dream. And that is what a lot of these companies are doing right now, is saying, here is the dream we have, and here is how close we are able to get to that dream. And it's pretty close in a lot of the cases that we're seeing, right? It's kind of in that 90 to 95%, like, yeah, we're so close, it feels like we're almost there. It feels like it's imminent. But robotics has shown over and over that the 90% is the easy part. Mm-hmm. The 95% maybe even is the easy part. The last 5%, which is that long tail of like, as tasks get harder and more specific, just they get harder and harder for the robots to do, to the point where it may not be possible. And those edge case tasks, you have to be able to handle them, because when you're operating in the real world, if you can't handle them, it may lead to robots being unsafe or impractical. We're in the middle of this moment of hope and optimism, but these robots are rapidly going to collide with reality, and everyone's going to realize that this is a lot harder than we thought it was going to be. And that last 5%, all those tricky little problems, are going to take a lot longer to solve.
The future of AI robot empathy.
Whenever I have something like a piece of technology of mine that like stops working, I feel a little bit bad. Like whenever I upgrade from one phone to another, like I always feel bad.
For the phone?
Yes, I get an attachment to the phone because like you know, I've had phones for years and years and years, so I get some sort of attachment to it.
Dude, I know what's asking you to. Oh my god.
And it's still alive, and it's still functioning.
Wait, so you see it as alive?
Well, it's just like, it's not damaged or anything. It's a robot. This is not broken. Doesn't feel pain. Doesn't hurt.
Would you damage that robot dog so it no longer works?
Well, that's another question, isn't it? You're destroying the toy as it was manufactured.
When we ask the question, would you kick a robot dog? There's an underlying idea behind the answers people give, right? And that's whether we should treat robots with empathy. It isn't that people who would kick the dog immediately, no questions asked, have no empathy, right? It's just that they don't see the robot as something which deserves it. Empathy is something that's first and foremost given to our fellow humans. It can extend to other animals, even objects, but for the vast majority of us, it's other people who elicit this feeling of care, compassion, worry, and understanding the most. It's a feeling that often spurs us into action, to help others, consider their points of view, and even to change our own minds. If people increasingly see AI or robots as beings with feelings, emotions, agency, and intelligence, then what exactly does a future of AI-human empathy look like? I spoke to a friend of mine and fellow creator Hannah Witten the other day about how she's thinking of teaching her son Rowan about AI, considering that he'll grow up in a world where it's the norm. I wondered if she'd specifically considered it yet, and she told me that actually only a few days before, Rowan had referred to their Alexa as their friend Alexa. The idea that he was instinctually thinking of this simple home robot as capable of friendship, I mean, it could be seen as a childish imagination, but I think we both felt a little skeeved out of the idea that without intervention, kids could assume that these human-like objects were sort of people you could be friends with, who you could also own and order around. If in the future we start to see humanoid robots as closer to humans than, say, a living but unintelligent animal or a non-physical artificial intelligence, then we might also start to project human experiences onto them, particularly experiences that connect us to our humanity, love, attraction, and reciprocal friendship. Can you be friends with a robot? Especially a robot with an AI interface that's designed for friendship. Like maybe even friendship geared towards your companionship needs. Can you trust that? Because for the person making friends with the robot, the experience for them is actually kind of very similar to the experience of making a friend who is human. Like when another person says that they're your friend, helps you with your needs, supports your endeavors, is physically intimate, like giving you hugs, you can't see into their minds, right? You don't know what they really think or feel, but you just have to trust that they're telling you the truth. Connection is an act of faith in many ways. And so to us as humans, the experience of robots that insist on having an emotional connection to us is kind of startlingly similar. Like, is friendship about feelings or behaviors? After all, you can have a friend who feels companionship and love for you, but you wouldn't consider a friend because their behavior is anything but. And similarly, someone might behave to you in a friendly manner, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they feel friendship towards you. Does it matter if a robot can't feel friendship if it acts as a friend would? Some scholars argue that the robot is almost immaterial, that the reality is the human feeling of connection. That's what's important. Love and sex are too broadly conceptualized to determine if it occurs in human-robot relations from an outside perspective. Rather, if a human believes they love and or are having sex with a robot, then outsiders should believe it as well. I'd argue that our own feelings are not always a reliable measure of reality, especially when it comes to interpersonal relationships. It reminds me of the image of a parent forcing their child to be nice to another kid. Like, a friendship is pushed by a will outside their own, and the second child might be none the wiser, as the first agrees to play with them and listen to them talk. They might experience and feel what they see as a friendship, while the first child is filled with boredom and resentment. Children's reactions to AI and robots are increasingly becoming an area of study in our new reality, including the way that they treat them and how far they see them as alive or even human. Now we're seeing with kids that they have this sophisticated understanding where they're able to think, okay, a Roomba, it moves autonomously, but it doesn't have feelings or mental abilities, said Flanagan. What separates Alexa and Roomba is that they think the Alexa has mental abilities. So children will say that the Alexa can think, that it can choose to speak. They also think that the Alexa has emotions too. Interestingly, children thought that Alexa, which has no body, no physical manifestation, actually could think and could feel emotion, and knew the difference between right and wrong. So the real difference between the two was basically a Roomba is like your pet and Alexa is like your friend. When we see AI toys for kids, we can choose to view them as like modern extensions of the Woody and Buzz action figures who talk to us in their cycle of repeated stock phrases at the push of a button or the pull of a string. As kids, perhaps we saw those toys as alive in some ways too. But there is, I think, a key difference in the autonomous interactivity that new AI toys might bring. Not just a semi-passive object to support play, but a mobile thinking creature object. Being taught to treat toys nicely before now was about respecting people's possessions. And so when we use them to teach kids lessons in empathy, it was just that, a teaching tool that they then passed on into their interactions with other people. Instead of scolding, don't damage the doll, we might say, don't hurt the baby, like we talked about before. But now our ideas of empathy, politeness, and humanization might well make it that we're encouraging kids to see AI or robots as humans in and of themselves, or at least things worthy of human treatment. The questionnaire results relating to anthropomorphism and agency show an overall pattern of confusion, with around 1/3 to 1/2 of the participants indicating that they were unsure about whether smart speakers have feelings or agency. This suggests that while the majority of the children do not believe that smart speakers are literally human, they are confused about what to believe about the human-like behaviours which they exhibit. The highest proportion of the participants were unsure whether their smart speaker has feelings, maybe being 37%, while 35% of the participants believe that it does not, and 28% believe that it does. So parents have a decision to make when it comes to teaching their kids about AI. They can emphasize its unhumanity, that it's a robot, it cannot really think or feel, and devise ways of interacting with it that make that clear. Or they can lean into it as a tool for teaching things like manners and empathy to humans, a way of practicing patience or saying please and thank you, for example. Some roboticists argue not just with encouraging empathy towards robots, but actively building what's called empathic communication into them. It's not uncommon for children to express violence against robots, which may or may not later reflect in their attitude towards fellow humans. In this light, it might make sense to design technologies that provide EC. That might include robots that express feelings in response to events or interactions, helping teach kids that kicking is wrong by having a robot act physically and emotionally hurt after they are kicked, for example.
If the ugly robot dog said, please don't kick me, then you would, that's all nicely. What if it had a name? The ugly robot dog is named Bella. Would you kick it?
I worked with someone named Bella.
Okay.
No way.
The question is if continuing this humanized illusion might do more harm than good, encouraging people to believe that these programmed reactions are a sign of genuine emotions, feelings, beliefs, or autonomy. Even within the world of robot dogs, there are concerns about how a false belief in reciprocal affection from a machine that is programmed to never show you anything else might become an issue. There are robot pets, which can offer the companionship of a puppy without requiring all of the care. The puppies can express a type of puppy exuberance and love and can make children happy. Is this a problem? Probably not, except to the extent that these puppies suggest to their owners that companionship is a one-way street and that we can be kept amused without having to give back in any way. Even goldfish, which are utterly indifferent to us, still need care, and we should not raise a generation of children who assume that delight comes at no cost to personal commitment. There are also counter-concerns that insisting that people stop empathetic treatment of humanized machines could encourage the dehumanization of real people in turn, as people get used to treating things that look, speak, and behave in a human-like manner as not human. Evan brought up a thought experiment that I think is important to consider here. It's a thought experiment that, while I was posing it to people in person, and I've done that a lot, while working on this video, any person I've met, I've asked them if they would kick a robot dog. I'm so fascinated by the answers. When I asked them Evan's question that you're about to hear in a second, people really struggled with it. And I think it's because there are so many options. It kind of gives you an open-ended question, and there is no correct answer, not just in terms of morally correct, but in terms of etiquette, because we haven't reached a place where we are thinking about these things as not objects or people, but something that fundamentally is between in the way that it is mimicking humans, and that we are going to have to deal with that.
An interesting thing to ask people is if you have a humanoid robot in your house that is not currently doing something for you, what would you want that robot to do? Would you want it in a closet? Would you want it to just sit on the couch and stare into space? I've asked people this, I get all kinds of answers because people don't really think about it because the companies never really talk about it. Does it just stand in the corner and stare at you? All you have to do is give robots a little bit of a head or a face. I don't even think you need to do that. I have robot vacuums that I don't think they're sentient, but I turn them over and I make sure that they're nice and clean because I feel bad if they're doing work for me. And they're not. And so I've talked a lot to the companies who build these, right? Just like a Roomba, which has no human robot interaction features, really. It was never designed with them. But these companies have realized over time that it doesn't matter. That one of the essential things about a robot with any amount of autonomy is that people will connect with it emotionally. And it doesn't matter if the people building it intended for that to happen or not, it will happen. And so it has sort of been a belated thing that these companies have realized that not just that they have to think about that, but that they can exploit it in the sense that if the robot needs you to do something for it, like it needs you to clean it or change its dustbin or whatever, if it does that in a way that takes advantage of the empathy that you have for it, it'll be much more effective at getting you to do what it needs to do. And so as you extend that into robots that have a lot more opportunity to leverage human empathy, there's a lot of potential there for good and also for evil, right? Because these robots can, these robots can have effects on their users that are either intended or unintended, and that can be either positive or negative, right? They will be able to manipulate people into doing things, and that can go in a lot of different directions.
When we're thinking about AI empathy now, it might be about whether you say thank you to Alexa for setting an alarm or adding something to your shopping list. But if these machines become potentially more present and more human in a physical sense, then questions of empathy start going way beyond politeness. How easy would it be for robots used for more insidious purposes to be designed to seem harmless, to encourage empathy and sympathy, to preempt trust or forgiveness? Robots in policing or military settings, or supporting fascist actions or colonial violence. Robots that can be used to collect and sell data, not just about our online information, but anything happening within our homes. For me, when I think about questions of AI human empathy, what I'm really interested in is questions of human empathy instead. The consequences for us. I don't care if someone kicks the robot dog or not. I don't think it says anything in particular about their morals or who they are as a person. I think it's an interesting tongue-in-cheek question. It was a brilliant thought from Rowan at 3 a.m. But when you dig down at people's reasoning, ultimately it's never about robots. It always comes back to people. They wouldn't kick it because the owner might be upset or angry, or someone had worked hard to build it, because it might hurt their foot, because it might seem mean, because kicking hurts. Every answer is ultimately through the lens of how it might affect themselves or other people. Concern for the robot only came so far as they could see it had a sense of personhood. And so I want to ask in this final section of the video to consider what consequences this world of humanized AI and robotics might have for us. Would, for example, excusing mistreatment of robots make us less empathetic towards humans? Some people say yes. Given the empathetic responses to abuse of such robots and the intuition that torturing them is wrong, treating robots in morally questionable ways is likely to create a perception that it is acceptable to treat humans, or at least other living beings, in the same way. Thus, it is imperative for the legal orders to act against the abuse of robots. But even as I emphasize that it's people that we should be concerned about in any decision about developing technology, I'm aware of the blurring lines of person-robot hybrid experiences. And no, I'm not talking about some kind of far future cyberpunk machine man. I mean the hybridization of human and AI which is rapidly entering the workplace. Think about customer service experiences, where replies to your queries are switching rapidly between AI chatbots, real people, and a combined program of set responses clicked by a human but written by a machine. Or what about office workers outsourcing copywriting tasks to ChatGPT, replacing what just a few years ago was an entirely human endeavor with an artificial back and forth? A back and forth to complete the task as they prompt AI to make changes, but also a back and forth between people as they both use AI to write emails to each other. And then there's the more egregious example from late last year, where robotics company 1X announced their robot butler Neo was going into pre-order. It comes in a choice of 3 colors, cream, grey and dark brown, and stands at an unintimidating 5'6". It's being sold as an at-home companion, taking care of any household tasks from filling a dishwasher to tidying our rooms. Oh, and one more detail. Because the tech isn't advanced enough to actually have Neo do any of these things safely and reliably on its own, it will primarily be controlled by remote workers. To start, owners will have to register for an app on their phones, from which they can schedule tasks they want the bot to complete. In other words, anyone who wants a Neo in their house is going to have to get comfortable with a stranger peeping around every nook and cranny. And not just the individual stranger who is on the other end of the machine, but the company itself as well. If we don't have your data, we can't make the product better, Bornich admitted in an interview with the Wall Street Journal. I think there's something to be considered looking at the smoothly designed humanoid, clearly made to be enough like a human to ping rich people's sense of future advancement, but not so human to be reminiscent of a mechanical slave. How much do you give personhood to a robot compared to the person who is on the back end? How much politeness do you afford humanized technology in contrast to the humans that suffer in its manufacturing? You, as in literally you and I, but Primarily you, the tech companies, the decision makers, the funders. When these investors or creators of AI and robotics tech talk about how their products will help people, I think it's important to ask if that help will be better served coming from someone else entirely. In Japan, with the rapidly aging population, they're increasingly looking to the potential of caregiving robots, for example, aimed at engaging older people socially and emotionally in order to manage, reduce, and even prevent cognitive decline. They might also provide companionship and therapy for lonely older people, make those with dementia-related conditions easier for care staff to manage, and reduce the number of caregivers required for day-to-day care. However, a growing body of evidence is finding that robots tend to end up creating more work for caregivers. A major national survey of over 9,000 elder care institutions in Japan showed that in 2019, only about 10% reported having introduced any care robot, while a 2021 study found that out of a sample of 444 people who provided home care, only 2% had experience with a care robot. There's some evidence to suggest that when robots are purchased, they often end up being used for only a short time before being locked away in a cupboard. Would investment in recruitment and training of people into care jobs not make more sense in solving issues of a need for carers, rather than spending an inordinate amount of money developing and selling robots that do a subpar job and that not everyone can afford? Like developing a robot that can hug elderly people to try and combat their chronic loneliness might make for an ostensibly sweet viral video on Facebook, but when you stop for like 1 second and realize that we are looking to outsource not just human thought and creativity, but human connection and care to machines, it just seems a bit depressing, honestly. It seems to me that the question should be around why this loneliness exists, rather than assuming that it's a given and teching our way through it. Ultimately, the issue of coming to a moral and practical conclusion on how to treat AI or robots is that the potential impact on humanity is quite simply unknown. Some researchers are concerned that habitual mistreatment of AI might lead to moral de-skilling, while others claim that it's merely fear-mongering. But realistically, we just haven't had enough time to know how far the way that we treat these humanoid machines might cross over into how we treat each other. And I guess there's a world in which that's the end of the video, you know? We don't know for sure yet. Check back in a few years and we'll see how it's going. But what kind of video essay would that be? So, welcome to the final part of the video. I would kick that robot dog right into the sun. That's right, I said it, and I'll say it again. If I didn't have the leg power of a newborn baby bird, I'd punt that hound into the stratosphere. Because I think that the best, most helpful thing that I can do for my fellow human beings right now is to ensure that there is a clear understanding of what AI actually is and what it isn't. As far as I'm concerned, you actually don't have to respect AI at all. I know we're used to androids and robots and AI being presented in fiction as stand-ins for humanity, but we don't live in that world anymore. These machines are no longer fictional. We kind of can't afford to be doing that anymore. We gotta get real, people. This guy is a nightmare in reality. A machine that can monitor your emotions, your moods, your vitals, that gets on the market and it'll be delivering stealth ads for snake oil cures in a second. I think the real danger now is continuing that humanization to a point where humans do not understand AI's limitations, what it's capable of and what it isn't, what it can be trusted with and what it can't. It's increasingly hard to tell AI-generated content from human-made work. There are no widespread policies or laws dictating AI disclosure. As we've seen through this whole, however long it's been, video, people are being duped into believing that these machines have feelings, personalities, attractions, empathy, that they are on your side, maybe even that they are your friends, your loved ones. I don't think that we should be deciding between either be nice to AI because it's the right thing to do morally or don't be nice to AI because who cares. We should be asking, what is the option that has the highest potential to give people the best understanding of the reality of AI? Right now, we're kind of presented with this choice of be polite and respectful and empathetic to these machines or be violent, rude, and horrible. But these shouldn't be the only two choices. We're interacting with AI and robots right now using the tools, language, and manners that we know from other situations. Remember this clip from earlier?
No one's asking you to. Oh my god.
And it's still alive, and it's still functioning.
Wait, so you see it as alive?
Well, it's just like, it's not damaged or anything. It's a robot. This is not broken.
I think it's so interesting that even though this is someone who has been filming these interviews with so many people, you know, asking them to think deeply about their answers, questioning their word choices and perspectives, he still instinctively also describes the robot as still alive. And it isn't because he thinks that it's alive, but it's just the only word that we really have. So maybe it is time to develop language specific to these machines, language that doesn't suggest humanity or life within it. Maybe we need to be asking what new etiquettes need to be developed when communicating with AI and robots. Maybe we need policies to ensure that AI and robotics developers include clear, non-sentient indicators within their products that actually work. If the goal is to improve humanity, as these companies claim, then we need them to justify their decisions to add false humanity to these machines. Because in this world where tech billionaires make global decisions for the future of humanity based on their own whims, they're dictating where funding is pointed and where it isn't. And all that stands between us and a truly nightmarish use of this technology that takes advantage of our instincts to empathize with and trust it is the moral character of these powerful billionaires. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for joining me on that mechanical canine odyssey. If you would like to help support me make these kind of videos and my work, please consider checking out my Patreon. The link is in the description. It honestly would mean the world. I have had been bowled over by the support I've gotten after last year talking about wanting to be primarily community funded. Absolutely adore all of you for being willing to support this kind of like independent research and discussions around like sociology and these different topics. And there's also a ton of like fun perks that you can get in exchange. So please check that out. I love to hear everything that you're thinking. I feel truly so blessed that my comment section on my videos, knock on wood, it's always so full of such fun, thoughtful, kind, lovely people. Even if you disagree with everything that I've said, I still love hearing people's takes because they're always done in such a interesting, fresh, and like respectful way. So yes. And I guess even if you have no thoughts on the video altogether, I'd love to hear in the comments if you would indeed kick the robot dog. And if you're willing to go even deeper, what you would do with a human Evan's question about what you would do with a human robot when it wasn't working for you. Where are you putting it? Are you putting it in a cupboard? Are you making it face the wall? I'm interested to find out when I read the comments when this video goes live. And finally, if you want to be kept up to date with stuff I'm doing, I have a newsletter, my social medias and stuff, links are also in the description. You can find me all over the internet there. And until I see you next time, bye.
The only situation where I would kick the dog is if it's an evil dog. So if like in a Zootopia world, where Zootopia robot dogs, this dog were dog Hitler, I would kick it. But I would not kick it in real life.